guys, it's Trish and I'm back with my first project of the new year. For today I'm participating in the MFT Sketch challenge, and you can see up in the top right hand corner I have this sketch right in front of me so that I can follow along exactly with the guidelines. So to start it out, I'm using one stamp set for this whole entire card, kind of like a one-hit type wonder. This one is the MFT Roughing It stamp set, and I'm taking the stars that are in the stamp set and just stamping them all over this layer in no particular order. And I'm using Versamark ink and using some of the Wow Clear Matte Dull Embossing Powder, and then I'm heat setting that and letting that cool a little bit before I move on. To create my background, I'm using a ton of distress inks. I'm starting out with some peacock feathers, and I'm really working at the bottom of this panel, and I'm going to be working my way up. Next, I'll be using some Salty Ocean, and what I'll be doing is overlapping it with the peacock feathers to get that really pretty blend and gradient color, and then I will be moving up towards Chipped Sapphire, and lastly I'll be adding a little bit of Dusty Concord up at the top just to give it a slight purple tint. Once I have the background blended exactly how I like it, you'll see here that I'm going to be using a wet baby wipe, and I'm just lightly rubbing that across this panel just to remove any of the excess ink that's been left on the stars to make sure that they're that stark white color that I'd like them to be. Next, I'm moving on to two of the larger trees, two of the smaller trees, and then the trailer from the stamp set. And I've stamped these out in the MFT Hybrid Licorice Black ink. And I've stamped this out on Simon Says Stamp 120 pound cardstock because I will be doing some Copic coloring. All the trees are going to be colored exactly the same way, so I will just show you one of them not to bore you. I'm starting out with YG63 and just adding a layer of this onto the tree to really just create the moisture to let the rest of the blending go down. Then I'll use YG67 to create some shading as well as a little bit of definition onto the tree, and then I'll go back in with the YG63 just to blend it out just a little bit, and then to color in the stumps I'll be using E39. Next I'll be moving on to the trailer, and I'm going to be using some neutral grays to color the wheel. I'm using N3 just to put down a layer, and then N5 and N7 to just create a little bit of shading to make it look more round and not as flat. Once I finish that, I'm going to be moving on to the actual trailer portion, and I'm using cool grays for that. I didn't want to make the wheel and the trailer match too much, so I'm using cool grays. I start out with C1 to just put down a layer, and then I'm using C3 to create the shading, and then going over that with C5 to really add my darkest color, and then I'll be going back over it in reverse order. So once I've laid down C5, I'm going back over that to blend it out a little bit with C3, and then lastly C1 to just make everything blend seamlessly. To finish off the trailer, I'm going in with BG05, and then I'm doing some shading with BG07, and then blending it all back out with BG05. I'm also using these colors on the curtains of the trailer, so you'll see that here in a moment. Lastly, I'm adding in some yellows to the strip across the trailer as well as the bottom part of it, and for that I'm using Y15 and Y19. Just adding very little shading because this is such a small portion and it's not very noticeable, and I'll use Y19 just to color in the center of the wheel, and that completes the Copic coloring on this card. I'm then going to cut out each of the trees as well as the trailer with just some scissors and fussy cut them, and then I'm going to be coloring the edges with a Memento black marker to just really clean it up and make them sharp. Next, I'm moving on to my sentiment portion, and so I'm using my EK Success tool to just be sure there's no extra static clinging onto my vellum strip. I'm then stamping the sentiment with some Versamark ink onto the vellum, and then I'm going to also add a few of the stars from the background to either side of the sentiment just for some interest before I go ahead and use some Ranger Superfine Detail White embossing powder to heat emboss the sentiment. I'm then working on assembling my card, and so I'm measuring out exactly where I need that banner with the sentiment to end, and I'm cutting a flag shape on either side to really match the sketch. I have a really tough time deviating from sketches when they're planned out for me. I feel like I cannot stray from them, otherwise I'm totally breaking the rules. So once I have all the pieces ready to go, I'm just going to go ahead and assemble my card. I'm going to be using some of that Cool Tack foam tape. I really like this because it's clear and it's great behind vellum. So I'm just attaching my starry background with just some basic snail adhesive. And I apologize for being out of camera view at some points. I'm trying out a new setup with my camera and I'm still getting used to exactly where is in range. So you'll see here again that you don't see me adding the foam onto the back of the sentiment, but I'm just using 3 really small pieces, one on either end of the sentiment and then one in the center, and I'm kind of positioning them either behind stars or behind the sentiment so that it is not noticeable once I attach it. The one to the far left you can see, however, I'm planning on covering that up with one of the trees that I'm using around the trailer. So I'll go ahead and attach this onto my card. And by the way, the base of my card is some Nina Desert Storm 100-pound cardstock. And I really love this cardstock for card bases because it is super, super sturdy. So to attach my remaining elements, the trailer and the trees, I'm just using some basic 3M foam tape. And I'm just cutting it down as needed. Some of the trees will be popped up on foam tape and others will just be attached with regular snail adhesive. It depends on where it's laying on the card. So for example, this one tree in the front will just have snail adhesive because the trailer is already popped up on foam. So you see here I'm just kind of fidgeting with it and making sure that the placement is exactly where I want it. Lastly, I'm going in with my Signo broad white gel pen and adding some faux stitching around that background panel. And then I'm going to be taking my Wink of Stella clear brush tip marker and just adding it all over the background panel. I know that it's a starry night, but I wanted to add a little bit of glitter onto it as well, and this is just the perfect way to add that last little bit of detail. And that completes my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this card. I really enjoyed making a one-hit wonder type card where I'm maximizing my use of the stamp set by using every last bit of it. Be sure to check out the description box down below or my blog for a list of supplies used, and I'll see you guys in the next video.